this was such a ride. I cannot even tell um, how surprised I am uh, going back in time and see what we have achieved. Um, and so it is, I think, a good reason to celebrate and discuss what we have achieved and the future we foresee for biodata, which you will see is looks um, auspicious at this point, given that we have managed to evolve into becoming a legal entity and so on, which is about to happen now. So, but I'll give the discussion. I'll open the discussion to the speakers that will certainly cover all these details during this event. And to start with, we have here Nicholas Blomberg, who is the CEO of ELIXIR Europe, who is going to give a first presentation to be followed by Arlindo Oliveira, who was the initial head of node for ELIXIR Portugal, um, and they will give a first overview of what is the purpose of ELIXIR and the what we have done in the past 5 years to engage in this development. So, Nicholas, please, if you could address the audience, and thank you very much for accepting to be here. And I'm looking forward for your presentation. I can see your screen already.
Yeah, and I think you hopefully can hear me now as well, Mario.
Yes, I can hear you well.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here. So see if I can manage to share the slides. I hope you can see the slides now. Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. So thank you very much for the introduction and the kind invitation, Mario. And actually, you will know this because you actually organized. But one of my first trips when I started as an ELIXIR director in 2013 was actually to Portugal and to a meeting Data Storm that was organized by Mario at one of the, I think it was the predecessor project to what then became Biodata Portugal. So I thought I would actually start the presentation with just reminiscing a little bit about that meeting and where we were in 2013, the start of that project. So ELIXIR had just started as an international. We were at the end of the preparatory phase, and we were just about to launch as a permanent research infrastructures. There were about 15 countries that had joined at that point. Today we are 23. And Portugal was, as you know, one of the first countries to join ELIXIR and was really part of it, the journey all from the start. And I remember it was a very nice meeting. I think we were out in, well, the name has escaped me. But what I thought was interesting was just going back to some of the slides and the talk I gave to that meeting. So one of the things that we talked about then was really the importance of the national nodes and the ELIXIR national nodes. And I think we sort of envisaged ELIXIR as this hub and spoke network where the national nodes really align with the national research priorities, the national strengths. I think that's still very much true, and I think that's what we're going to see today. But I thought it was very interesting to look at this hub and spoke model and think about how it turned out, because actually the way it turned out in ELIXIR now, about 8 years later, is really much more of a network. And so it's not a sort of a hub and spoke with national nodes communicated with the center. I think what we have actually created is much more like a large community where people within the national nodes find that they have colleagues with very closely aligned needs and interests in other countries across Europe. And I think that's been one of the real strengths of ELIXIR. And I'm going to come back to that because I think that's a real really important feature for these national nodes to help to drive collaboration with colleagues and peers across Europe. And the other thing is really the scale. So if today we're 23 members, but really I think it's about 220 institutes that are linked into ELIXIR through all the national nodes. So that's actually the scale of the network is really quite large and something we should be proud of. This was another, and I had to smile when I put together the presentation. This was one of my slides then. So this is 8 years ago when we talked about the future challenges for bioinformatics. And actually, I think this is a slide that we could talk about today. It's about the challenge of integrating clinical translational data, manage and operate heterogeneous and big data, and then work to understand how we preserve trust and explain the impact to people who are affected by the changes in genetics. I think what is not on this slide, and I think that's something I'll come back to, is actually the many other fields that have turned out to be really quite important for ELIXIR. And then, of course, we have the large sort of gray area, which is the sustainable funding. I think Arlindo might pick up on that in his presentation as well. But I thought it was interesting because this slide that I gave, I talked about it at an ESPRI meeting just a few weeks ago, is essentially very much the same. I talked about the challenges of distributed data production, about access and governance in human data, and how to manage open data and the policies of European funders. And so in essence, some of the underlying drivers and problems that we deal with as a community hasn't really changed very much in the last 5 or 8 years. And I think that those will probably remain important challenges also into the future. How do we deal with these the data coming out of the research projects at the national level? So where are we then today with ELIXIR? So I thought I would, in this talk, say a few words about where we are with ELIXIR in Europe, and then try to point a little bit to the future and actually talk about what we've done in the COVID pandemic, which of course affects us all. Otherwise, I'm sure we wouldn't meet today. And really focus on, I think, one of the major learnings, which is how these national infrastructures and the national structures are really critical for the ability to respond. So ELIXIR as a distributed research infrastructure, I think we are active in many fields. We work to support databases, software tools, workflows, and deployment of computational workflows across Europe is a really important area. Training, of course, is really important, and I think Portugal has been very, very active in this area. Data management support and data standards, I think, have come up as really critical areas for ELIXIR, and something that we work together with our national centers to put in place this sort of support to national and international projects for good data management. And of course, I think we try to help to bring together compute resources and align that with large-scale initiatives like the European Open Science Cloud. I think the key thing with ELIXIR, though, is that we're not doing this technology-driven, but we're really trying to do this in close alignment with our different communities. So research efforts in the different life science domains, whether it's human genomic, rare diseases, plant sciences, infectious diseases, of course, this year, and biodiversity, which I think will starting to become a real driver for ELIXIR and will become one of our major activities going forward. I see a lot of interest in most of our nodes for biodiversity sequencing. But as an example, I just wanted to talk about the plant science community. And the reason, I think, is quite obvious. It's one of the, I think, real flagships. It's been very, very successful in ELIXIR. And of course, Celia Miguel's work has really been instrumental. She co-led the development of this community together with Paul Kersey for many years during for the first 5 years of ELIXIR. And I think we wouldn't be where we are today without the work of Paul and Celia. And I saw Celia will give a talk later today, so I'm not going to say a lot about content, but I think there are some interesting observations that we can do from the work in the plant sciences that are sort of generally applicable across ELIXIR. So of course, the community set out to help with genotype phenotype analysis for crop and trees. And if you look at the actions, I think it is definitely, or it's a very clear illustration of what we can do together across countries, and what the sort of collaborations that we want to drive in ELIXIR can really lead to. It's about developing common standards, and of course you don't want to do that on the national level. You want to engage on the European and also globally. You want to make data discoverable through common APIs, and for that to scale, of course, you need many of the large centers to join in and develop these common APIs. We need to find some exemplar data sets, and so that is again an activity which is very well done in collaboration across countries to make sure that we do have the most representative data sets. And of course, then we want to disseminate and help all the nodes to reach this level, because none of this is competitive. It is really better for the whole community, the more people who are trained and adopt these standards and APIs. And I think that the plant community really has been very, very successful. It managed quickly to tie in some of the major plant research centers in an international federation, including Portugal, and of course then develop a sort of federation-based search for germplasm across these centers. And I think this would not have worked without the engagement of the people and the individuals at these centers who really believed in the power of that federated search. Because what it takes is a lot of people at various places in Europe to actually be prepared to put in the work of mapping their internal systems to a common API, and then opening up that common API to federated search. And I think the plant community is really a very sort of good showcase or illustration of the power of that international collaboration, and how that sort of helps everyone in the community to get better access to data. And it's very large, and I just picked one of the acknowledgement slides from one of the presentations by Celia and Paul, and you can see that it's really been very, very successful in engaging colleagues across Europe. And I think that's, again, something that we should be proud of in ELIXIR, is that we can really be this platform for effective collaboration between the individual centers in a specific domain. But there is a generality here as well, and that is I mean, to connect national infrastructures, we need to have standards, and they need to be global standards. And we talked about the plant community, but actually within ELIXIR, this has happened in several other communities as well. And I think that's been a role that we've been able to play, and hopefully the national node, and I know the national nodes have been a vehicle for individuals to contribute to these large-scale standards initiatives. And I think another strength of the collaboration in Europe is that we have then been able to sort of speak on behalf of Europe, which I think is a good way of ascertaining that our needs and the needs of the individual national centers are well represented at the global level. So that these sort of standard setting efforts have happened in human genomics through the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health, in plants, as we talked about with BRCA and MIAPI, but also in sort of more technical areas as data identifiers and how to robustly cite data, which was a very nice collaboration between a number of nodes and the Californian data library and a few other big US institutes. So that was the sort of the first part of what I want to talk about, is how we can really work together to help to drive I mean, strong community standards and the data sharing within communities. I think that the second area I'd like to talk a little bit about is really the importance of the sustained investments and actually the value of this sustained investments in research infrastructures. And I think COVID is a really very good illustration about this. I'll say a few words about what we've done with within COVID in ELIXIR, but this is really not the COVID talk, and I actually want to use it more as an exemplar for why it is important to have these long-term investments. When we all know that open data is extensively reviewed, also in pandemics. This slide is from a talk I gave a week ago or so at an OECD meeting, but really it's a, if you want, it's a random paper from Science this year, and looking at SARS-like viruses and their effect of antibodies against those viruses. But I think what is interesting, if you look at the figures from this paper, is that every figure in that paper rests on public, open, accessible data in the large sort of public databases. It would not be possible to do a tree of coronavirus genomes or mapping the antibody activities against those different coronavirus and SARS clades if there wasn't for the collection of genome sequences in the European Nucleotide or the INSTC databases. And it would certainly not be possible to map out how these epitopes work in the spike protein and in different antibody classes if not people had submitted all of the protein structures into the open PDB databases. So I think it's really a very, very good example. And of course, we all know there are many papers like this. There are papers published every day that looks essentially like this. And so I think that's a really strong message to policymakers, is that actually this data is important. It's extensively reviewed. And when suddenly research springs to the forefront in the societal response, we actually see very clearly how important it is to manage the data carefully and openly from all our research projects, because we never really know when it's going to be used again. I think the other aspect of these large data resources is that they are normative. They enable us to talk about things in an unambiguous way. And so I just took a screenshot of the COVID-19 data platform with the two reference genomes to the original sequence of the SARS-CoV-2 genome coming out of Wuhan in China in December 2019. And then, of course, the UK variant as the other example, coming out in sort of the second half of last year from the COG UK sequencing efforts. But actually, if it wasn't for these open databases, it'd be very, very hard to sort of unambiguously specify these genome sequences and share them and talk about them and refer to them. And so I think it's important to recognize it's not only the data which is reusable, but actually the ability to reference to that data in an unambiguous way is a real strength in of good data management. And we know from previous work, for instance, that this is extensively used in things like patents. So it's not only that the data is used in patents, but actually, if you want to talk about an enzyme, you refer to the enzyme in UniProt. And so it's that referenceability, which is another key aspect of the sort of fair and open data. So just a few words on what we've done within COVID in ELIXIR and together with our national nodes and EBI at the sort of European Center. We've launched this COVID-19 data portal, which is really an effort to bring about open data and collect all the open data around the virus, the SARS-CoV-2, and the disease, the COVID-19, in the single place. And so the data, I think, is really an impressive showcase of sort of the power of open data. It's over 750,000 records across different molecular platforms. They're all openly available, so you can download via the web or API or FTP. And I think we've had about 126,000 users or 4 million requests since the launch in in April last year. And you can see a breakdown. It's not only viral sequences or host sequences, it's also imaging data, biochemistry data. And I think really important and interesting, it's linked to the preprints and the literature data. So you can crosswalk between the rapid sharing of results in preprints and the open data sets that link to those preprints. So that's the COVID-19 portal, but of course we know that most countries, if not say all countries in ELIXIR, have been very active and collecting national initiatives for in response to the pandemic. One of the things we've done is to bring that together on an interactive map for visibility. And I think one of the good outcomes of that, I think we've seen a number of really productive collaborations between different countries. I know Sweden, for instance, have worked with Greece and with the Czech Republic to help setting up the national portals. I think there is a very productive collaboration between Switzerland and Norway around some of their underlying technology. And I'm sure there are many more that I don't know of. So I think, again, that sort of peer-to-peer network that I talked about in the beginning is a really important part of what we've done in ELIXIR. And I think we've seen that manifest itself in the many sort of national COVID data portals that are now being online. I think there are now 8 online. There is probably 1 or 2 missing on this slide, and I know there are others in the working. And again, a lot of this rests on the work that happened early on in Sweden. They released it as an open source web application, and then other countries have been able to follow suit and use that toolkit. And so again, I think it's that sort of peer-to-peer collaboration that we really should cherish within ELIXIR and try to build on. So we're coming back to where I started on the value of these research infrastructures, and I think it's fair to say that we would not have been able to mount this response and this quick response if we hadn't had these sort of 5-8 years behind us of close collaboration and the sort of well-established networks. People would not be able to pick up the phone in Norway and call someone in Switzerland to get a copy of the Galaxy pipelines within a few days if it wasn't for the fact that they actually knew each other quite well from the previous work and collaborations within ELIXIR. So I think that's a really important value that we deliver is these networks. Of course, we deliver the scientific services as well, but one shouldn't underestimate the importance of that collaborative structure. And so if we look a little bit forward, I want to talk about human genomics and the sort of the development of a federated European data area. Because in particular for human genomes, we all know that it probably won't be possible to collect the data in a central database. It's not even desirable to have it in a central place. This will have to come through national structures and where sort of the trust and the policies and the access mechanisms are governed by national regulations, but also close to the individuals that are affected by the data sharing and the data analysis. So I just wanted to end this with just talking a little bit about the sort of the future of genomic health and the beyond 1 million genomes. And so I'm sure many of you are aware of the 1+ million genomes initiatives, which is a commitment by 21 European countries, including Portugal, to give cross-border access to over 1 million sequenced genomes by next year. So that's scarily close in time, actually. There is a project called B1MG, which is there to support the member state declaration and is now starting to deliver components of the architecture and the roadmap for implementation. And I'll just say a few words about that. And I'm sure you know one of the working groups was of course led by Astrid from Portugal on the personalized medicine access. And so at the core of this are the national nodes. And this is an example from Finland and our federated EGA. But really, we need to have national structures to start to organize the individual hospitals, biobanks, projects, and individual submitters in a country. And establish the procedures, the standards, and expose the metadata so that other countries and other researchers can actually find and access this. And so without this sort of national organization and federation, it'd be really very, very difficult, I think, to scale transnational data access. And that's something we, in a way, that's Europe's biggest challenge, but also our biggest opportunity. If we want to achieve data analysis at scale in Europe, we need to cross national borders. And while we have a single market, and I think we're all enjoying the sort of the freedom of movement in Europe, it is still international borders, and many regulations are national, in particular when it comes to health. And so that, I think, is a difference between, say, Europe and the US, is to, if we want to create large-scale cohorts, then we need to move across international borders. That's very complicated. It takes time to set up, but actually, I think it's also an opportunity in that if we do this well, and I think we're starting to do this well, we are likely to set the path for the rest of the world to follow, because there is only, we will need to be leading on this if we are to compete on science internationally. And so how do we go about this? And I think, again, this is really something that one, which rests on the national structures and will be increasingly important for the national structures, is that if we are to create a federation in Europe, it will need to be standards-based, and we need to think about what are the different standards that we need for data sharing, what are the reference implementations, and actually what are the organizational capabilities at the national level needed to be able to share data using these standards. And all of this is complex. It will require a lot of training. It will also require national investments. And I think that's have to be the focus, or that I think is the focus now for ELIXIR over the coming year, is to try to develop these sort of, we call them organizational maturity models, but really help countries to set out the roadmaps. What are the standards? What are the reference implementations? And what are the organizational capabilities needed to participate in these European federations? To be able to spell that out clearly and then help all our nodes in a collaborative way to establish those capabilities at the national level. And so if we do this well, I think we'll be really quite an important part of the future European health data space, because I think we have shown in the past that we are actually quite good at connecting data and people across countries. We saw that from the plant-based example. I think we've been showed that we're quite good at connecting data across rather heterogeneous data sets and diverse data types. And I think we've also been quite successful in sort of navigating the open and the access controlled boundary for building large-scale data sets. So I just wanted to sort of sum that up, stop there, and really end with this picture, which is from Lisbon. And I think this is the last time, it's our all hands meeting in Lisbon. And I think that's the last time we actually met as a whole community in ELIXIR was in Lisbon at a very successful meeting in 2019. So with that, I'll thank you for your attention, and perhaps an extra thanks again for all the support in organizing this meeting a year and a half ago. So thank you very much, Mario, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you. I don't know, should we proceed with questions, or if we continue and then open the floor at the end? Maybe we'll go for the second option. Let me give a little bit of additional detail about this, the context of this event, which I forgot to mention. The 5th anniversary of ELIXIR is taking place within the Bioinformatics Open Days, which is a national event of the bioinformatics community, which is now on the 10th edition, has been successfully organized by our partners from University of Minho for years. And we have, in the past years, always join and participate with enthusiasm on the organization and on the event. So this celebration is in fact taking place as the first day of the conference, which was to be take place at Minho again, but this time is being conducted on Zoom. So, and I forgot to give the context that we are actually should be meeting physically in Braga at this point and not here on Zoom. So we have now the presentation from my colleague Arlindo Oliveira, who has been involved in the bioinformatics activities for several years. He was one of the people at the genesis of the initiative of Biodata initially, and then that became to be the Portuguese representation within ELIXIR. Arlindo is a distinguished professor at Técnico and also a director of UNESCO, among many other positions that he holds. And he has a rather provocative title for his talk. And I hope he is not going to spill the beans, but at least give us a good overview of what has been the process of the creation of biodata and our participation within ELIXIR, and also what we're going to do about this in the future. So Arlindo, please, good morning.
Thank you, Mario. I will try to share my presentation. Let's see whether this works. It seems to be working, I think. Yes. Are you seeing my first slide?
Yes.
Very good. This is quite a challenge because I'm not sharing the whole screen, well, anyway, so good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I greet in particular Nicholas and all my colleagues from the ELIXIR and Biodata that are here. And what I will try to do, I knew that Nicholas was going to give an excellent overview and presentation about the relevance of ELIXIR as a whole and by implication of the national nodes. And so I thought about doing something slightly different, which was go a little bit into the history. Of course, 5 years is not a long period so that we feel nostalgic about history, but still, actually, these things started a little bit before, and I will even go back a bit before just to give you some framework of where we are now. Actually, I will go way back to 1929, when it was created in Portugal what was called Junta de Educação Nacional, the National Education, whatever, I don't know how to say junta, which was the first attempt to create an institution that would support science in Portugal. So this Junta de Educação Nacional, this national education institution, let's call it, I have no idea how to translate this. It lasted only for 7 years, and it was replaced in 1936 by something called Instituto para a Alta Cultura, so an institute for higher culture. This one lasted longer, actually lasted some almost 20 years. And in 1952, it was extinct and it was replaced by the Instituto de Alta Cultura. So basically they replaced the para by de, and it was of course a totally different institution. And this lasted until 1976, 2 years after the revolution. And Instituto de Alta Cultura, this Institute for Higher Culture, was actually what the government had at the time to support science in Portugal, which was a very incipient thing. So Portugal was under a dictatorship until 1974, was very delayed in comparison with other countries in what regarded education, higher education and science. And in fact, despite some attempts of the Portuguese government at the time to improve our situation in what regards science, it took very few steps towards that. In 1952, it was created inside the Institute for Higher Culture. Was created a commission that then led in 1954 to Junta de Energia Nuclear, which was the institution that managed nuclear energy in Portugal. We never took the direction of having nuclear energy, but we had a nuclear reactor, an experimental nuclear reactor that is actually, it was decommissioned a couple of years ago, but it is now part of Técnico. Instituto Superior Técnico basically integrated this Junta de Energia Nuclear in 2012. And this Junta de Energia Nuclear actually played a significant role in developing this component of science, basically physics, in Portugal. Anyway, so this is all ancient history. The not so ancient history is that in 1967, it was created GNICT, Junta Nacional de Investigação Científica e Tecnológica. Again, so it's an institution, national institution for national research and technology. And the thing about GNICT is that several of us around here know it because we have been fellows of GNICT. So we received fellowships from GNICT to go study abroad. In particular, I think Mario may have done this, but I certainly received. And this was for many years the institution that supported. It was created in 1967, 7 years before the revolution, but actually it lasted until it was extinguished in 1997. So it lasted for 30 years, and it was towards the end of the 20th century that this institution was extinguished, and the Portuguese Foundation for Science and Technology was created. GNICT had a very influential president in 86 to 89, José Maria Nugago. He later became Minister for Science and Technology, the ministry that was created in 1995. And so we can say that modern science in Portugal started somewhere in 86. At that year, actually, Portugal joined CERN, and by the hands of José Maria Nugago, he actually led to a radical change in the Portuguese position in science until the ministry itself was created in 95, and 2 years later, in 97, was created the Foundation for Science and Technology. Now, why is this vaguely interesting or relevant to where we are now with ELIXIR? Because you have to realize that modern science financing in Portugal has only 24 years. It was only the FCT, the Foundation for Science and Technology, created in 97, that we saw the appearance of the modern system that finances science and technology in Portugal. And that also explains a little bit why we still don't have a long-term planning for infrastructures, for scientific infrastructures that necessarily need long-term planning. So this is why I spent 5 minutes on this or whatever. It was that so that you get an idea that the modern framework for the financing of science and technology in Portugal is only 24 years old. And José Maria Nugago basically created this framework using a rather smart expedient, which was he created the initiatives before he had the money to fund them. So basically, he created a fait accompli, and then the government had to find money to finance whatever initiatives he decided. So it is like this that in April in 2002, that what took place the first national re-equipment program, which is, we can think that is the ancestor of the current infrastructure network. So in 2002 the program opened. 3 years later, more than 3 years later, in 2005, it took place the signature of the first contracts of this which is called Programa Nacional de Equipamento Científico. So it's a national program for scientific equipment. So in 2005, the first contract was signed, and at that time, there were a number of acquisitions of smaller equipment and equipment for individual institutions, but six networks were financed at that time in 2005. The Nuclear Resonance National Network, the Mass Spectroscopy National Network, the National Network for Electronics Microscopy, the National Network for Advanced Computation, the National Network for Brain Imaging, and the National Network for Geophysics. So those six infrastructures are the first time that Portugal created something like a national infrastructure, with the possible exception of the creation in 1954 or whatever, of the 1956, actually, of the national reactor infrastructure. So there was a national infrastructure, but those six are the more modern ones. And now we get to the point where we show up. I mean, ELIXIR shows up. And ELIXIR shows up starts, now let me see if I can do this, starts in 2010 with a document that was a proposal to create an ELIXIR node in Portugal dedicated mostly to woody plant bioinformatics. We focused on woody plant at the time, and we still keep this focus. But so this is a document written in 2010. It was written mostly, I'm not sure, uniquely by José Leal and Ana Freitas. I believe they are here, and let me extend a word of thanks for having started this process in 2010. Some of these dates or events may be a little bit off because I was not involved in all of them, but people are listening and may correct me later on or interrupt if you want. So this was in July 2010. In October of that same year of 2010, there was a presentation of this done in Cambridge by José Leal and Ana Freitas, and at the time Janet Thornton was pushing for the idea of creating this ELIXIR European network. And so José Leal and Ana Freitas went to Cambridge and made this presentation. The anecdotal evidence, the anecdotal information I have is that this all started because sometime before José Leal was in Cambridge and Janet Thornton met him and asked something like, "Aren't you Portuguese? We need Portugal in this." And I think that was what started this process, this document, and this. In 2011, there is a protocol that was signed by two groups of institutions. So that included ITQB, IBET, IGC, and SEDOC on one side, and INESC-ID and FCCN on the other side. So this is I think you can see the document. It was created. This is a protocol to develop, as you can see, as an objective to start the basis of cooperation between the institutions for the development of a bioinformatic infrastructure dedicated to plants. In almost more than 1 year later, so in December of 2012, the application form was officially sent to ELIXIR, and on the wake of this, in June 2013, Nicholas Bloomberg visits Lisbon, as he already referred, and he had a number of meetings at Técnico, at INIAV, at ITQB, IGC, and FCT. I remember I met with him at that time. And I think I also knew that he was relatively new to ELIXIR at that time. I think he may have replaced Janet Thornton, or maybe she was at the time, but so Nicholas was at the time starting. And what is the relation? In a few months later, in September of 2013, the call closes for the national infrastructure. So there was the second call for these national infrastructures. And in 2014, the FCT signs this agreement between the Portuguese government and the ELIXIR hub. We can only see the signature here of Miguel Ciaro, who was the president of the at the time, but I think it's also signed by ELIXIR on the other side. So this was signed in June of 2014. And we could consider this as the date for the start of the ELIXIR node in Portugal, but not really, because there are still a few things missing here. So this is more it's a consortium agreement, is more a declaration of intention to build the node. In later that year, in September, we received a letter from ELIXIR with the statement that the hub started operations and looks forward to establish the collaboration agreement, which is the document that is missing. And in December of 2014, biodata is included in the Portuguese infrastructure roadmap. Okay. Then we have a few relevant parts. In 2015, the ELIXIR Accelerate project is approved. I became head of node, replacing José Liel, who was the first head of node also in 2015. And I mean, now to my point, in December 2014, biodata was included in the Portuguese infrastructure roadmap, but no money was given. So no money was given to any infrastructure. So this is the Portuguese style that was invented, created by José Maria Ngago, which is first you create the facts and then you find money to pay for them. So even though the infrastructure was approved in 2014, only in 2016 opens the call. And in July, so biodata was submitted, and in February of 2017, biodata was approved. So this goes to the point that, I mean, we have been trying to create this national infrastructure since 2010, but it took 7 years until we get final approval from the Portuguese government to support the node. And I apologize if we may have told a slightly rosier picture of this to the ELIXIR hub and to Nicholas, because I mean, every time we were expecting this to go faster, but it took a while. I think I have, in 2016, we finally signed the ELIXIR collaboration agreement. It was signed, of course, between the hub and the INESC ID, which was the representative of the consortium. And in 2017, as I said, we finally have the financing for the biodata infrastructure. This is the acceptance of the term that you are saying. And I think I have it here. In 2018, we delivered the final piece. Oh, by the way, so in 2016, so this is the 5 years we are commemorating. This is a collaboration agreement that was signed between ELIXIR and INESC ID. But there was still a missing piece, which was the service delivery plan that was handed in and signed in 2018 by the hub and by the head of node. That was me at the time. And so sort of this in 2018, sort of this closes this process of creating the ELIXIR node, which has had a number of important steps. It started with the intention in 2010, with the signature in 2014 between FCT and the hub, with the collaboration agreement in 2016, and finally in 2018 with the service delivery plan. And you can say that this takes a long time. It's very slow. In fact, it takes a long time and goes very slow. But this goes to support my point that it gets delayed basically by the fact that there is a strategy, but there is no money set down to support that strategy. And this, of course, was not unique for biodata and for ELIXIR Portugal. It happens to all the infrastructures. But what is even slightly more worrying is that once you create an infrastructure, there should be a commitment to support that infrastructure, subject to evaluation, of course. There should be a commitment to support that infrastructure by a given time. You cannot create an infrastructure for 3 years. It's too short a period for a project of this nature. And again, that's what we are still not observing, right? I mean, we still don't know exactly what will be the future of the Portuguese infrastructure. By the way, in June 2020, and I will finish, in 2018, Mario Silva replaced me as head of node. And in June 2020, we had the final and greatest edition of the Portuguese Roadmap of Infrastructure, which now has 56 infrastructures. And for none of them, we have at the time a clear perspective for financing. So we expect and we hope that the Portuguese government will find the funds to fund this infrastructure. Certainly, there is money in the resilience and recovery plan of the European Commission and in the next framework. But the fact is that we still don't have a totally clear picture of what will be the financing of these 56 infrastructures that exist in Portugal and also of Biodata. Of course, we are hopeful. We are so hopeful that we decided, and I think we'll hear about this, we decided to create an institution going from this consortium of institutions to a new institution that will have a more tight integration between the diverse, the many people that work in Biodata. We will be creating this institution, I think still in May, if the memory serves me right. And I think this will be one more step taken in 2021. But this was basically what I wanted to share with you about a little bit of the history of science and technology and the financing of infrastructures in Portugal. And now Biodata, which, as you know, is the Portuguese infrastructure for the Portuguese ELIXIR node. How Biodata. Thank you very much, Mario. Claudia. And I'm done here.
Thank you so much. That was pretty good insight. It was impressive that you were able to recover all that past. So I think I'll open the floor for discussion. I would like to know, I know that we have many participants here who have been part of ELIXIR Portugal and Biodata since the first day. So at this point, I would like to see if anybody from the audience wants to raise a question. If not, I will just try to spice things up and ask about this situation we have always had, and I think we will continue having for the future, which is the perception of what is a research infrastructure versus what is a research project. We see that our funding institutions still see very much that they have disorganized in research frameworks, which last for some time, 5, 7 years, and then they have mechanisms to fund projects within those frameworks, and that I believe fits rather well to the model of funding research activities and so on. But what we do here is not really something that is going to last for 3 to 5 years. Is something that supposedly would or should last forever or for a very long time until we figure out a different way of organizing the support for research. So maybe you could share your views on this. How can we build a sustainable research infrastructure in Portugal, integrated, of course, with the research infrastructures of our member states, and how do we work them in cooperation under this constraint that, in fact, we are always asking for projects to develop things in the next short few years, but there is no kind of support to sustain this for the long term as it is required by infrastructures. So you have any views on that? How can this be evolved? Maybe Arlindo first and then Nicholas.
No, I think I already made reference to that. I mean, I think that we are missing. I mean, all the persons involved in political, the minister, the president of FCT, they are certainly very much interested in supporting science and so on. And they have been doing their best to open calls and to find financing for projects and for fellowships and so on. That they have done very good work in the last decades. But I think infrastructures require a somewhat longer term commitment. An infrastructure project is very different from a normal project. It's very reasonable to have a 3-year project and then whatever results, you make another proposal or not. An infrastructure you cannot plan for a short period. So there should be a fundamentally different financing way, a way to finance infrastructures. We should have, I don't know, 10-year periods or 7-year at least. Maybe we could put this together with the frameworks, the European frameworks, and then there'll be a commitment for 7 years. And after evaluation and assessment, we could have a commitment for another 7 years. I think it's very important. And this is not just for this infrastructure. I think it's important for all infrastructures that we have this sort of long-term financing that can support them.
If I may interrupt.
Otherwise, it's difficult to create critical mass and to keep the people and to educate people and keep them working and so on. And so I think this is one of the reasons why we may have been obtaining less results from several of these 56 infrastructures, results less impressive than we would like to.
Just before I pass it to Nicholas, you mentioned twice the word after. I don't think it is after one program ends that we should get funding for the next period. It's like 2 years before one program ends that we should start negotiating, and let's say 1 year or 6 months before the ending of one program, we should have already the commitment for the next 7 years if we are going to continue. I think that's
yes, you are entirely right. It was poor English. I mean, of course, the assessment and the commitment for the next time frame should be done before the project ends, maybe 1 year, 6 months before, whatever.
Okay, Nicholas. So, and how do you manage from Hingston dealing with this uncertainty that I think it's not only unique to Portugal, that all these different infrastructures kind of rely on this kind of model, and there is not continuity, at least in not all of the states.
No, I think that's right, and I think that's one of the challenges with these distributed models is, of course, that fundamentally for an organization like ELIXIR to work, it is about getting the national nodes to work, and they all need to work. And so I think for the ELIXIR hub, that I see as one of our most important roles is really to work with the national partners and try to help them, to position them on the national roadmap. So I really like Arlindo. I thought it was a really nice expose of the history in Portugal, and it seems, I appreciate it seems very messy when you're in the middle of it. I don't think that's very different from most other countries, this sort of political commitment to achieve something, and then you go away and try to find a bit of money, and then at some point some of these infrastructures or the initiatives are much more successful than others, and then they tend to sort of be rolled over and get long-term funding, and it takes a long time to build up these national structures now. And I appreciate it. It's very frustrating. But coming back to your point, Mario, I think, I mean, how can we manage this? And I think there is a really nice project. I think Anna Portugamelo has of course been involved in this together with Corinne from the hub and Norway and a few other nodes, which is really looking at how can we sort of manage the development of national infrastructure. How do we sort of position them in the national landscape, and of course, how do we articulate the benefits to the national stakeholders? And I'm sure Anna could comment here, but I think the questions and the drivers and the challenges are actually very, very similar, I think, across countries. So it's not only that we can share data and share the tools, but we can also sort of share the experience and work together in building up these national structures. Because I think they are really important to enable also sort of the whole research community in bioinformatics. We're talking about the infrastructure part here, but of course, the infrastructure is there to serve the research community and try to align and support the strong research activities within the country. But I don't know if Anna wants to say something there, but I think that's for me, it's a really good example of how we can try to help to manage these challenges that we have at every national level. And it's not only Portugal, I think it's within every country.
Yes, I think Anna is here. She is the co-host. Let me introduce her because Anna is now the CEO for Biodata and the vice head of node for ELIXIR in Portugal, and that she has really become, she joined us a few years ago, 4 years ago or so, kind of the heart and soul of all the initiative. So Anna she has probably the best view on this. Anna.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure being here, celebrating with you the 5th anniversary of Biodata. I have 2 questions that I will leave for after my comments on Nicholas' challenges. And the greatest, or one of the greatest challenges beyond getting the money is to getting recognized as useful, because we were made to be useful. We were made to boost research in the country and to create a community of experts that are able to share its knowledge. And also to do this in an international environment where we learn from each other, and we can be on the state of the art of, in this case, bioinformatics, computational resources and data management. And it's a struggle, but we need to have impact. And the work that we have been doing together with the hub, with Corinne, but also with Christine, who is here today. I've seen her around, and she can also comment on this. And Francesca from the Italian node, together with other colleagues from Spain and the Czech Republic, was to see which would be the indicators that we could present to our stakeholders and tell them, look what we have done with the investment that you have taken on us. And it is quite interesting because, as Nicholas mentioned, we are enablers of data management, of advances in bioinformatics, and on making available or democratizing computing resources. And this has impact for the skills of the human capital, which is critical in every country. It has impact in the productivity and the efficiency of the science produced, and it has an overall impact in the innovation of the country, and also in the knowledge transfer that can be delivered to the industry. And so we can say that research infrastructures can be a motor of development for the countries. And this is a sort of a return on investment. And what now I think should be done, maybe at another level, is to convince the funders that this really is important, that they recognize this as as the achievements that they want to see, because sometimes it's not just what Erlind mentioned, that we launched the program and then we funded it. We launched the program, but sometimes we don't know what do we want to achieve with the program. And this leaves it very difficult to assess later on and also to self-assess. So some more professional management is required regarding research infrastructures. I don't know if Christine would like to say something now, but I just leave you two questions. And this is for the three of you. I'm very curious with the answer. Will we be here celebrating the 10th anniversary of Biodata? And if so, what in 10 years we would have done and what would be the impact of our actions for the national and also for the international research community?
Good question. I don't know who can answer that.
I can start, Anna. So will we be here in 5 years' time? If here is my bedroom, I hope certainly not. I would love to meet you in Portugal. But more seriously, yes, I think so. And the reason for that is something that I picked up also on in my talk. So more seriously, so if we are in Europe to be serious around large scale sort of data analysis in the life sciences across the fields, whether it's human genomics, whether it's plant sort of genotype, phenotype data or biodiversity sequencing data, if we want to build really large data sets in Europe, we will need to collaborate across countries. And I think if there's one thing we've seen very clearly from the work we've done on the COVID pandemic is that the countries that have strong existing national structures were actually the ones that were best at collaborating internationally, because it is much easier if you have not necessarily a single institute. It can be a plethora of people in difference, but you need to speak with one voice within the country to be able to effectively work internationally. So I'm sure we will be here also in 5 years and in 10 years, Anna. But I hope we'll have escaped our bedrooms at that time.
Yes, if I may, Anna, I think I'm quite sure we'll be here. Biodata will be here, and infrastructure will be here, and they will most likely be better funded than have been now. First of all, I think the next 7 years will be good from a financial standpoint because of all the European instruments for the recovery and also the next framework. So I think Portugal will, and our country will have to decide how to better use those funds, and certainly supporting this digital infrastructure and biodata in particular is certainly a good investment. But there is a stronger reason for that. As Nicholas was saying, I mean, no country in Portugal, not even Germany or France, has the scale to come up to be able to compete with either the United States or China on the sort of projects that we need to do to be competitive. And ELIXIR is, of course, one of the several European infrastructures that managed to bring together the efforts of all of Europe, and this is very important for Europe, but it's even more important for Portugal, because what we learn by being in ELIXIR, what I certainly learned, but I think we all learn by being in ELIXIR, this connection with these large-scale projects that we have no way of doing in Portugal. It's absolutely fulcral that Portugal is in this in ELIXIR and in other relevant initiatives, because otherwise we'll just miss the boat, we'll just miss the train. So I think we have to be here and we have to do all for that. Now, the only thing is that, as you know, we cannot be fully reliant on state funding, on stable state funding. There's no such thing as stable state funding, at least not in Portugal. So we'll have to complement whatever state funding we'll be able to get with other sources of income. And of course, you can provide a large number of services that can be used for that. But I think we'll be here, and I think the next 5 years we will accelerate with regard to the last 5 years. We now have some infrastructure in place. We have some funding. Don't forget that The project started 10 years ago, 11 years ago, but we only had funding since 2017, right? So, I mean, it really started only in 2017.
Yes, I think I can comment as well. Of course, I think it will depend mostly on us if we are here in 5 years or not. I don't see at this point that funding is the critical point as it was probably in the past. I know that our funding is ending in 1 month, but I am quite aware of the new programs and the opportunities that will come. To me, the challenges are twofold. On one hand, we need to keep on reaching out the communities and help bring the resources that are being developed at the European level to the local research groups and make them aware of their existence and how it can be used and shared. So continue reaching out to the communities and making that effort. I think it's a key aspect to continue as a relevant organization in 5 years. And the second one is our adaptability to what's coming next. In the past, for instance, I remember that when we started, and Nicholas mentioned that, when we started ELIXIR Portugal, there was this idea that every country would have kind of a specialization and would be strong on something that would be complemented by the others. And the idea is that Portugal would try to become stronger in the plant science aspects. But in the meantime, we also realized that the communities were much wider, and then we started looking into the aspects of, for instance, human health, even before COVID. So we joined the 1 Million Genomes Initiative, and we realized that to reach out to communities, because there is such a significant number of people working in the biological sciences that have strong interactions with healthcare, that we should also make human health data a strategic point of ELIXIR Portugal. So we have been now involved in some of the activities within Converge on ELIXIR, and then, and as I mentioned, 1 Million Genomes and other COVID data portal and so on, are all initiatives that have called upon us to have a role at the national level on organizing human health data. And I think it is visible at this point that the system is relying on biodata and ELIXIR Portugal to take this role. So this is a challenge. Of course, it is much more challenging and risky to address human data than plant data in the country. But I'm confident that we will be able to engage and congregate the communities. But for the next 10 years, I really don't know. I just know at this point that this is a key aspect of the development of ELIXIR Portugal. But I'm sure that in 5 years, in 3 years, there will be new challenges that we are not even thinking of in terms of providing this infrastructure. And to me, the survival of ELIXIR in Portugal is really that we pay attention to this change and be proactive in bringing in people so that we can continue to be relevant. That's basically how I see it. I don't know if you want to, I had this kind of as a question, but as Anna asked it to me, I would also to see your comment on this aspect. How do we pick up the challenges, the teams around which we congregate people, so that ELIXIR continues to be relevant? What should be the way to do that?
I'm sorry, is this for me to respond?
And it's open to you. And you've,
No, I think that Nicholas could be critical in responding to such a question.
Yes, I don't know really where to start. So, I mean, I think it's really important for the national nodes. They, as Anna said, I mean, Biodata.Portugal or indeed all our national nodes. I mean, they are funded, as Alinda pointed out, they are funded in the country, by the country, for the country. It's a national structure, and first and foremost, it needs to be aligned with the needs of the national research communities. They will be quite different across Europe, and I think that's fine. It is an exercise in diversity, and then we try to distill out some common elements. And I think this means that nodes will focus on different things. It's not necessarily so that they need to be unique. I think they will naturally gravitate to the areas where there is a strong underlying research presence or a research focus in the country. I mean, I don't think there is an accident that countries like, I mean, Norway, Christine is here, or Portugal are strong in the marine sciences compared to, say, the Czech Republic or Switzerland. I mean, there will be a strong strand of marine research in our sort of coastal nations. And of course, we should try to enable and let these groups work together across ELIXIR, regardless or not if there are other countries who have very little marine research. I mean, human health or human genomics will actually, I think, cut across all the nodes. There will always be a strong biomedical research angle. And outside these, there will be quite different research drivers in the different countries. And I think we just need to manage that diversity and make sure that there is opportunities for all our nodes to sort of serve the national research communities, because that's what they're there to do. And then the purpose of ELIXIR is, of course, then to try to help and strengthen the nodes and to strengthen the international collaborations between these nodes.
Yeah.
Mario, I think that José Leal is also there, and he has very good insights on how we can still be relevant for the community.
Yes, Jose is here. So
Hi,
Jose,
good morning, everybody.
One of the dinosaurs of this 10-year organization.
Not when was lost, even Ana Teresa is around.
Everybody, Jose, in Portugal in bioinformatics. So, and he's the chair of the Biodata initiative. So no one better than him to comment on this. Jose,
I mean,
please.
the short answer is I don't know. The slightly longer answer is that I think with ELIXIR as a whole, as a reason, as a community driven by bioinformaticians, now they changed name, now they want to call it biomedical data science or other fancy names. But it has been a community of somehow, generally speaking, engineers with that go the little hammer trying to find the nails to hit. And I think that the only way that we will be able to become relevant and survive as an institution is to focus on what the needs of the users are. And that's something that I think that we felt over the years when we tried to sell biodata/ELIXIR to funders and other stakeholders, is to answer the question, what purpose do you serve? And can you exemplify what the specific problems do you solve? And we have a lot of technology and a lot of ideas, but in fact, we don't have a lot of solutions for this problem, for the problems that users and so come up with. At least not very visible, I think. And I think that's the only thing we can do, is to focus on the problems rather than the solutions. And thank you for ambushing me like this, Anna.
I think I became expert. And also I could ambush Ana Teresa and Isabel Rocha, because they are very silent and I'm sure they have a lot of thoughts on this.
Okay, sorry, I'm moving from one device to the other because I have a couple of things running at the same time. As Jose said, it has been really a bit difficult to set up the node in Portugal, not only because we don't have a clear idea about the funding during years, but also because we have not being able to perhaps to provide a service to the community that they value. We have been trying to, for example, to involve biodata in research projects, like or trying to influence or discuss with FCT if this infrastructure should be the one to deal with the biodata for most of the research projects that we have in Portugal. And one of the things that I can tell you is that each time I try to involve the biodata in one project financed by FCT, it is a success case. So, and Ana Portugal knows that we had a project like this. I have been involved bringing biodata to these research projects. And I think we just need to give to all the researchers a better vision about the services that you can really provide, because most of the projects they are willing to do and to have this kind of support, that is to have a CRM, to have the data managed, to have, but for this, of course, we need to have a fund or some kind of revenue that could be more stable to recruit people and to have a team, okay? Regarding the industry involvement, what I can see in Portugal is that things are still, we still need to develop a lot of things. So the mindset of changing data between academia and industry is not there. Is not there at all, okay? So that's why in my last discussion around biodata and biodata infrastructure, I proposed that we should build that mindset, being involved with startups, trying to provide solutions to startups in healthcare or in the bio ecosystem, because like this, we will build that collaboration from scratch with companies that are really being developed right now with a different mindset, with a more scientific background. Because if we try in Portugal to go to the big industry, I think we will not succeed.
Thank you. And Isabel has joined us.
I was here already. Yes, so many of the things I wanted to mention were mentioned by Anna. We had a discussion not so quite recently actually on this, but first I would like to start with a more with an optimistic note. I think Miguel is also sharing that in the chat, which is I think the beginnings are always tough, and to really find out what our mission is. I think we are in that process. There are some issues related with the fact that this is, we are in a way focused, but the scope is quite large. So for a community that is relatively small, the scope is quite large because there are many different fields of applications. So it's, and we don't want to leave things behind because they are relevant. But I think that is one of the reasons that things have taken some time to shape. I think also Miguel mentioned in the chat something that I was going also to mention is the fact that we have our industrial sector in some of the areas related with our mission is small in Portugal. Many of the companies, the sector is small. The companies themselves are also normally not large. Many of them don't have R&D in Portugal. So this interaction, I think, is the most difficult one. I think we are making our progress regarding academia. I think this year's shows that we are having a role within academia, and I think this is going to happen naturally. The fact that we are going to be stronger and more relevant within academia. In industry, we have all of these limitations. We may need to focus more in this particular part of interaction with industry, and of course startups and interaction with startups. I think I also totally agree that's one of the ways to interact with industry in a very specific role of helping these startups on all aspects related with biodata management, analysis, and so on. So I think that's probably where we are going to have a more prominent role within the next in our next cycle. I would say. But I would like to stay optimistic because this is still I don't know, a baby, perhaps not, but an infant. So and I think things have always become more with more participants. So we have much more people participating from different groups. We have a very wide geographical coverage. And that is, I think, very, very, very important. And also the community itself is getting stronger because of biodata. So I think we already achieved a lot. Although, of course, sometimes when we are inside the process, we don't realize that so much.
I can add something also regarding what Isabel was saying. That is, of course, I would like to give a positive note. 5 years for a startup, because biodata is a startup. And 5 years for a startup as biodata in the bio or health space, it's really a baby, okay? So we still have a lot of things to do. And one of the things that I said is that each time I build a project for FCT, I involve biodata. And now that we have many more institutions connected to the node, if we, all of us as a community, if we take this step and each time we propose a research project, we use biodata as the platform, as for data management, we will build something. It needs also to be, we need to take action from inside, from the members.
Okay, let me break in here. So as I was expecting, people began to warm up, and now we are very excited with all this discussion. I see lots of messages, but on the other hand, we are also approaching the time, and our speakers have other commitments as well, so they can stay here much longer. So I would like to use the remaining minute to thank very much Nicholas for being with us today on the opening session of the event, and Arlindo as well. So thank you very much, everyone. I think they have to go, but of course, if not, they're welcome to stay, and I can take more questions. But I would stop here the formal session on the bioinformatics challenges. I can't remember the name anymore. I know that we have a second session at 2:30 p.m. So thank you very much, Nicholas. And if anybody wants to stay, I will be here. And I think there are very, very good comments about the involvement of industry and so on
here that we could also discuss for those of you who can remain here.
Thank you very much.
Thank
It was
you.
a pleasure seeing you and talking to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a real pleasure. So thanks for having me.